Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, ZP002, Chris Bardagon, and with me today on the show, Paul Taylor, Mr. X, back joining the show. He has been a recurring guest. He will probably just have to take the title of part-time co-host with Jamie. Eventually we get both of these guys on, and then we have a power trio here. But I mean, you guys make the power. I'm just the host. But Paul, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, man.
Seems like every day I'm on here.
Well, it does seem like that because, you know,
maybe I just talk to you every day. That's
I mean,
problem.
we do talk a lot. And I mean, I enjoy that. You know, it's a lost art form to communicate with people via an actual phone conversation, much less in-person stuff. People are busy. Life happens.
Yeah, life happens. I still got a range down here that a certain person on this podcast hasn't come down and checked out yet. Been here for almost a year.
It's funny you mention that.
That is crazy.
It's funny that you mention that because I do have some training coming up in 30 days. And I kind of feel like I need to take a trip down there one day during the week and knock a little bit of rust off, have some bourbon and a cigar with my buddy, with my broski Paul.
Well, I might have to check my calendar. I don't know if I can fit you in.
And there we go. And that's why, folks, and that's why I haven't been there since he started.
Oh, come on.
The man is busy. Okay. He's running classes all the time. If you haven't checked out Warhorse Tactics, do that because it's Facebook. He's so busy. He doesn't even have a website yet, guys. So
yeah,
definitely doesn't have time for me. Right. There you go.
Come on. I have time for you every day. You know that.
I know. And you know what I love about our conversations is they range from everything firearms to just mindset, thought process, different ideologies. And you know, you asked me questions on gear. You just asked me about how I handle making coffee while camping. And I'm a coffee guy, right? And there's a lot of us out there that are. So it's very, very important to have the right setup. And we've talked about preparing for our trips, right? Whether it's you walking the C&O Canal, me going for a weekend car camp situation, whatever it is, we prepare for that. And we shake out our gear. I am still shaking out my gear. I just did that with the coffee setup. You know, I wanted to be able to make 2 cups of coffee at once and not have to go through an entire process because everybody knows here, you're not just popping a little plastic cup in a coffee maker at your campsite. You may, if you are an RV guy and you've got that set up, but I boil water, we make coffee, and we use a Stanley French press. I guess I'm one of those Stanley cup people that went not really. I mean, those Stanley drink, whatever those were, those tumblers.
Hey, remember that? You said it. We didn't.
Right. I mean, listen, those people went crazy, but I've been rocking these Stanley coffee thermoses, if you will, for a minute now. And it's important to shake them out because there's nothing worse than not being prepared.
Well, and I think that's a good point. The whole thing where, you know, just about the time you think you got your gear all together and perfect, you know, situations change. You know, you might go to, you know, just like me, I'm so used to camping at a campsite with everything that's on my back. Next weekend, for the first time ever, well, I can't say for the first time ever, because down in North Carolina, we used to go to Wilmington Beach and camp on the beach, but I'm getting my setup together to start car camping again.
Yeah.
And that setup's changing, and I don't take a stuff for a coffee pot and drinking coffee when I got stuff on my backpack. So yeah, I think kind of tying in what we might be talking about today is it's a constant evolution, constantly changing and making our loadout better prepared.
Yeah. Right. And you know, folks, today we want to talk about kind of, and this goes back to what I just said about Paul's trip back in 22, right? It was in 22 when you decided that you were going to hike the C&O Canal. And what we want to talk about today, guys, is knowing your limits and preparing for your adventures, I guess, if you will. And I think the two of them go hand in hand, right? You can prepare for climbing Everest. You can go buy all the gear to go climb Everest, but if you don't know your limits, you're not going to really get very far. And it kind of goes to a show that we just did with Jamie, where you're preparing for everything, and it was more about based on EDC. Like if you go out and you dress like Batman and you've got a utility belt with everything in it, it doesn't need to be. But this one obviously is just more based off of your experience and how you kind of prepared for that, and what your plan was going into it.
Well, a lot of it,
So
I mean,
I
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so go ahead and give. So obviously, for the people that don't know, give them the information that we're about to talk about here. What's the C&O Canal, and what made you do that?
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I linked up with a buddy of mine that I served with. He was my he was my, and we talk a lot about we talk a lot of smack about Air Force guys, but he was my Air Force EOD guy. And got to tell you, he saved my life on multiple occasions. And I'm not just,
Okay.
it's not a metaphor for anything. He saved my life. And he taught me a lot about, as an 18 Charlie, taught me a lot about clearing IEDs. And of course, we made stupid mistakes out there. I got lucky, but I've kept in contact with them over the years, just because, you feel that, you've got that brotherhood and that friendship that's going to, last for forever. And 2 years ago, he walked the Appalachian Trail, and I was lucky enough when he passed from Maryland to Pennsylvania to meet up with him. And he stayed at my place. We talked a lot. He's trying to get me to walk the Appalachian Trail, and I know I got probably a few limitations. It's like realistically probably stopping me from doing that. And I want to do it. I've got the time to do it. I can make time to do it, and so on, so on, and so on. But I was like, man, I got to be realistic about this. My knees, my feet just aren't in the condition that they were in 10 years ago. And I actually walked part of the trail with him. And the worst part is, if any of y'all ever walked that trail, right there when it gets into Pennsylvania, it's like the Appalachian Trail wasn't easy. They don't just like walk across the ridge line. It's constantly up and it's constantly down. And I just, being here in South Central Pennsylvania, there's a lot of hills, and even walking around here on the hills, it kind of takes its toll on my body. And but as I walked that, I still wanted to do something. I still needed a connection with, there's a lot of, PTSD going on. There's a lot of stuff that I was dealing with, and I needed to prove certain things to myself. And I live right off the C&O Canal. It was only like 15 minutes away from me, and I would walk it a lot, but I never really thought about walking the whole thing. So
okay, and just to kind of go back for anybody that right, and just to kind of go back for anybody that is not aware, I mean, obviously we have listeners that are inside the United States and outside the United States. So obviously the Appalachian Trail is about a 2,200 mile long footpath. And it traverses multiple states, and multiple kind of scenarios or scenes, if you will, or scenic situations. You got wooded pastures, wooded sections of it, pastoral, there's a bunch of different things, and I think it ranges in elevation as well. So it's definitely, if you're not aware of what your limitations are, you're not going to just go. When we talk about hiking the Appalachian Trail, it's not something you're going to go do on a Sunday at 2:00 in the afternoon. This is it's something that you plan for. So
Well, when
now
people through hike and then they do it in sections. I live
true.
right off of it. I've been on it. I mean, when I
Okay.
went through ranger school, we were on it. But
Yep.
yeah, people do sections at a time, but even small sections for me, it's just
Right.
it's
Yeah.
very
And it right.
elevation
And it
oriented. So,
sure. I mean it goes from North Georgia up through just all of those kind of middle states there, Tennessee, Carolina, Virginia, and it goes all the way to Maine. So, and it does go through obviously Pennsylvania, it goes through New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, into Maine. So it is quite a trek. And you are dealing with quite a bit of changes in elevation. Obviously, weather, if you start this in, if you start this in October in Georgia and you end at some point in however long you're doing it, you're going to deal with different kind of weather. So, but go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
yeah, most people start it like around the March timeframe, but then you got to deal with certain states being so hot, and then depending on
Right.
how long, but these through hikers, I mean, it's absolutely amazing what some of these, I mean, you have
Oh, yeah.
grandparents, you got 70-year-olds, you've got people, my buddy Bo hiked with a guy that just decided like a week ahead of time, hey, I'm going to do this, and didn't even have his gear together. And then one of Bo's female friends, like, she planned for this for a year. She had her food mailed to her, staging areas. Is absolutely amazing.
Oh, wow. That's
But
awesome.
of course, it's something that, I mean, if there was some amazing surgery out there, my knees got better, would I want to do this? Absolutely. It would
Paul,
definitely
there
be
is.
a huge goal of mine. But
Right.
I have to be realistic about this.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it, the C&O Canal was more realistic because considering it's a canal, it's flat.
Yeah.
So I can hike for days. I just can't do elevation. Going down hills probably hurts more than up hills. But you know what? I was like, it's uh it's 185 miles. It goes
Yep.
from Washington, D.C. to Cumberland, Maryland, and then it turns into a railroad or a railway that goes from Cumberland to Pittsburgh that I am going to finish. I'm going to do the Great Allegheny Pathway. But that was something that to me was a realistic goal. Now, with bad knees, is it going to suck? Absolutely. But sometimes we need to suck. Sometimes
Well,
we got to prove it to
I think it
ourselves.
is sometimes, well, I think it's, and you can probably understand this and probably this, this very well. You have to embrace the suck and just kind of deal with it. But you make the choice to do that. You know that you're going to do it, and you can choose when you start that and when you end that. And you're never really, you never, the only person you're competing with is yourself. And the quicker people realize that, the easier things can get, right? You don't have to worry about I don't know if that famous saying, worry about what the other family has down the street. Like you shouldn't concern yourself with the house that the Robinsons have. They've got a bigger house. That's fine. You don't have to compete with everybody out there. You don't have to do this hike in a record time. You do it on your own. And I think that was what you kind of, like you said, you knew going into this, what you were dealing with limitations wise, physical limitations. Were there any mental limitations that you went into this knowing that you were going to kind of experience?
Uh, yeah, that's funny that you should mention that because if it wasn't for events that happened a couple of weeks before that, I had already had it in my head that I was going to quit, that I was going to fail, that I had things on my
Okay.
schedule that if I didn't make a certain time, I had to be. So I had a class on my schedule. I was going to teach a class, and looking at the time frame, I don't think it would have been a realistic time frame for me to make it and then make the class. So I had a reason to come off the trail. And uh, I think if we're in a bad spot in our lives, we do that. We look for reasons to not accomplish things. And I already had that. I had gone into, and some of the viewers already know this. I had gone out to Colorado and did a motorcycle PTSD retreat with a group out there. And I actually worked through a lot of issues out there, and it put me in the right frame of mind to not only start it, but complete it. Because I think if I didn't go to Colorado, I don't even think I would have constantly came up with excuses to not make it. And they put a label on this, and I'm pretty sure you've heard this label before. And it's the label, the word, the term is resistance. And there's a lot of resistance in our lives, and reasons why we don't accomplish things and don't accomplish certain goals or don't even try. And I think that there was definitely a lot of resistance before and during. I mean, the cool thing about the C&O Canal is I did a daily, like, highs and lows, and you could see how my highs and lows changed from the start of the canal. And it took me 11 days to walk the 185 miles, but you could see how I, like, mentally changed, like, just in dealing with my highs and lows. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So how long did you prepare for that hike? And for those that are out there at this point Googling CNO and not finding it, it's not C.N.O. It's C and ampersand O canal. So, and that's for just, I made that mistake in the beginning. So folks, there you go.
I think you can find it if you type in CNO.
Yeah.
Like Charlie, November, Oscar, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
But no, I did not go into this cold turkey. Like, I hiked, I put a backpack. Now, it wasn't anything like preparing to go to Ranger School or anything. I didn't, I did the gear shakeout, testing my gear, testing my tent, made sure I had all the equipment, learned a lot about prepping food. I went out, but I mean, there were certain days on the canal that I walked 20, 23, 25 miles in one day. Wow. I never did that prepping, and that was, I think, if I had it all over to do again. And it's funny that you should mention something before, I wasn't competing against anything or anybody, but I wanted to prove certain things to myself, and doing that, you always hear the analogy. Sometimes we got to stop and smell the roses. I didn't start doing that until halfway through the hike, of just appreciating the scenery. I was, like, for the first half of the trip, I was there to walk. I was hiking. I was looking at my watch. I was, this watch probably looks familiar. You gave it to me. I was using that watch every day, and I was just logging in miles. And I got to the point where it's like, you know what, I gotta slow down and start enjoying this for what it is. And I'd put miles in, of course, but there was just it was a really awesome experience, because there was a change in me, and I saw it, and I would have never seen that if it wasn't for doing certain experiences like that. Like, we have to test ourselves. We have to go out and do things to, feel alive, or, so on and so on. And I can get more into that.
No, definitely. I mean, I think it's important, this is an experience. On this show, we talk about ideas and theories, and we try and base it off of some of our own past experience, some of our current experiences. This is one of those times. I mean, you prepared to walk 185 miles. You don't wake up on a Sunday and decide that you're going to go do that and then, be at work Monday morning. There's a lot of prep that goes into this. I mean, even if you were to walk 10 miles a day, and here's the other, I mean, to prepare for this, if you're starting at one point and you walk it from end to end, well, you still got to get back. So what was your plan for that?
Oh, my sister came and picked me up. I had a plan. Yeah.
Right. So
I took a bus to Washington, D.C. Like that was the plan, was to take a bus, and I did.
okay.
And then when I got to Cumberland, and the cool thing about the C&O Canal for me is I live pretty much right in the middle of where the canal is. So it's pretty much 90 miles both ways for me. And 90 miles by car is nothing. So yeah, at the end of the canal, at the end of walking, my sister came and picked me up and helped me get in the car and everything.
Right.
I think she put me in the trunk because I really didn't smell good at that point.
Well, yeah, that's
But
fine. And it happens. But, that's a great, I mean, I'm sure people do it, right? And that's a great question to ask some of the folks that decide that they're going to walk this thing from start to finish and then back to start. Now you're talking over 360 miles, and that's double the time, right? So if you're walking 10 miles a day and then camping out, it's an 18-day trip from one way to the other. Okay, that's just about 3 weeks. So 6 weeks in total. How did you prepare for that? Obviously, food wise, time wise, just being gone for 3 weeks. And you've got experience with it. Yeah, obviously you spent a good amount of time in the military, so you would be deployed and you would have to prepare for stuff like that. I mean, I remember talking to Jamie about his deployment, his last deployment, what he prepared. He's got a dog, he lives alone, so he's got a daughter, so you've got to prepare for a bunch of those things. How did you start your preparation?
I mean, it was only 11 days, so it wasn't 3 weeks.
Okay.
But
And that's because you decided to not walk. You walked more than 10 miles a day.
right, right.
Right.
I did have, I mean, I didn't know how long, like the first thing I did was, of course, make a plan. And if you go to the C&O Canal, if you go to any of these websites on any of these trails, there is there's a C&O Canal website. And mainly what people do, like I think I've saw two different hikers whenever I hiked it. Almost everybody rides bicycles on it.
Okay.
So you can go to a website and it tells you along the path, hey, here's the hotels, here's the campsites, here's where you can get food, here's where you can get water. So basically, I planned my route and how much food I had to carry based on how many days between towns that I had to go. And starting out, I think the longest I went was 3 days between towns. And so I planned, I knew it was going to rain. I had my cell phone on me. Number one for navigation. Number two to, make social media posts in the evening if I had service. But I also, I planned. I had a plan and had all these locations, and I had how many miles each campsite was from the next campsite. So at the end of the eve, or when I got close to like a halfway point for the day, depending on how I felt, I could go to my phone and open up the app and see, or open up my notes and see, well, the next campsite where there was water or so on and so on was this far away. So did I want to stop now or did I want to push forward? And some days I pushed over 20 miles and other
Okay.
days I went, 10, 13 miles, just depending on, and that was the cool part about it, was doing it by myself. I could kind of,
Right.
it's like, hey, if I want to stop and rest and relax, I can. If I wanted
Right.
to, like my last 2 days, I kind of wanted to get over with. I kind of wanted to be done. So I did almost 50 miles in the last 2 days just because, and that's why, like when I showed up in Cumberland, I was hurting. My knees were not doing well, but
God. Yeah,
I
I can
was
imagine.
done. So
Yeah.
like I was finished with it. So I was pretty,
Yeah.
pretty content and happy.
Now, so you've mentioned a couple of times about campsites. Um, can somebody step off the C&O Canal into the woods and just set up a tent, set up for the night, like just bed down for one night?
I think it's not recommended. I'm pretty sure that's restricted. But I
Okay.
want to say every 5 miles there's a campsite that is kept by the C&O Canal organization. So there's a portage on, and there's fire pits, and there's a picnic table or two, or so on and so on. So there's campsites the whole way along, and they're free campsites too, which is pretty awesome.
Got it.
Now
Okay.
you can stay at campsites. There's campsites all along that you have to pay for, but that wasn't part of my plan, was to stay at, and there's towns with hotels, and the pretty cool thing is there's in certain places, like, if you know anything about how canals work, there's locks. Well, some of the lock houses have been restored, and you can stay in the lock houses, and they're
Gotcha.
like pretty nice. But that wasn't part of my budget. I was like, every day I was going to Dollar General, not every day, but when I go into a town, there's a Dollar General, and I'd get ramen and packs of tuna, resupply my water and whatever I was going to eat for breakfast, and repack, and then basically head out, again, along they call it the towpath. You actually walk the towpath along the
Okay.
canal.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. So when you say you stepped off and you would go to Dollar General, obviously those are in vicinity to the trail. You said there was a couple of days where you didn't, maybe 3 days where you did not experience a town.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow along I used to live right above Hancock, Maryland. So
Right.
Hancock is about at the 100-mile mark or so, and that was awesome because when I hit Hancock, my sister came down, picked me up, went back home, did laundry. I had food there, ate a hot meal, and then the next morning she basically dropped me back off at the exact point where, and that's a big thing on the Appalachian Trail is they log in a lot more miles because they don't just walk the Appalachian Trail. When they get to certain locations to refit, sometimes they have to walk 5 miles, 10 miles to a town. A
Oh,
lot of them
wow.
hitchhike,
Yeah.
but some people, they don't, how the society is, they don't pick up hitchhikers.
No.
So,
No.
but they have that.
And you're a
They
scary
do a
dude.
pretty good
You're a
job
scary.
of figuring out their plan before, most of
Right.
them do, before they walk the
I wouldn't.
Appalachian Trail, and I
I
think
wouldn't pick you up.
I did the same. So,
I wouldn't pick you
but
up.
no,
You're
yeah,
scary looking.
well, and I gotta tell you, after 3
All
days of
those,
walking,
you smell it.
I can't say that I'd
All those
probably
tattoos. You're scary.
yeah, scary. But Brunswick, Maryland, I think, was my first stop.
Okay.
And it's a nice little town. They didn't have a Dollar General, but they had a store that you could tell hikers and bicyclists, that's where they went, because they had all the stuff. They had the ramen and the quick, food prep,
Yeah.
add boiled water,
Yep. Yep.
and so on and
So
so on.
would you like, what was the closest you were to a store from your campsite? And the reason I'm asking is, would you go and set up camp and then go walk in to town, or no, you would just go walk into town, get what you need, then go and set up and call it a night?
Yeah, that's pretty much. I don't think there was at any given point that there was a campsite close to
Got it.
a close enough to a town that you could, and not to mention the fact that once I got to my campsite, I set up my tent. There was no extra walking,
Yeah.
to go
Right.
somewhere and come back, because I was already like, they were fixing 2 parts of the C&O Canal, and those extra miles were not
Right.
miles that I accounted for.
Got it.
One, there's a tunnel. There's a really cool tunnel. Everybody look it up. It's called the Pawpaw Tunnel.
Okay.
And instead of like snaking around the Potomac River, they just cut a tunnel. I don't know.
Oh,
It's
that's
like a
cool.
half-mile long.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that tunnel was being worked on when I walked it. So
Oh,
I had to
Jesus.
walk up over the mountain.
Oh boy.
And I was prepared for it. I knew it was being worked on, but now you're adding elevation,
Yeah.
but yeah, it wasn't
So-
fun. But
Okay, so let's just go back and unpack a couple of things here. So obviously you put this thing in play. You were planning on doing it, but leading up to it, you were already finding excuses to not do it. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What made you decide to do it? I mean, why did you? And again, obviously, I'm asking the question. I mean, I know why you didn't do it, or why you didn't quit. So, what made you decide to stay on course and do what you set out to do?
Uh, I think I think mainly because I wanted to be in a better spot,
Okay.
like mentally, and
Okay.
I think at that point, and I don't know, did I know we definitely weren't talking as much then. Did we know each other then?
Yes, we did.
Did we? Okay, because I
I'm
can't.
offended.
My timeline's kind of messed up a little bit. I definitely was mental health wise. I definitely was not in a very good spot. Like I
Right.
was, I always use the analogy of PTSD to me is I'm in a hole. Like and I didn't just I wasn't just walking around and I fell in a hole. This hole was probably I was probably standing there and I have a shovel and I just keep digging this hole deeper and it's up to us to find a way out.
Right.
And part of finding a way out is asking for help. Is because there's plenty of people out there, my family, friends, I had people, in Las Vegas that tried to help, and I owe a ton of things to, ZERT and members of ZERT because they, in essence, helped keep me alive out there. But you can have those people that, they'll stick a ladder down there, but it's up to us to,
Climb
take
out.
that step on the ladder,
Right.
and start. And every night we might be halfway up that ladder and we might fall down a couple rings and
Right.
end up back down. And to me, that was, Colorado. I was around a bunch of veterans that was dealing with the same stuff as me, and they had a really good program. They had workshops we did. It wasn't just ride motorcycles, which is part of what I
Hey.
do.
Yep.
So now we're having, and I actually have the workbook right in front of me, looking at stuff
Okay.
as we talk about this. But it was one of those things where, as we're talking, we talked about resistance and we talked about this stuff and we talked about, putting things in place so we didn't. And I was like, man, all this stuff is hitting home. And at
Okay.
that point, as we're talking about that evening, I I I canceled the class that I was gonna put on, that I was gonna teach. I called up the people and was like, "Hey, I'm canceling this class,
Okay.
and this is why." And it's like, okay, um, I have to do this, just for multiple reasons. But at that point, I knew this is something that, I was tired of always making excuses. Whether it was gaining weight or not doing stuff or quitting or
Right.
it's my knees and, I can't physically do it now. It's like, if you put your mind to it, there are limits there, but we can almost accomplish anything.
Of course. I mean, you know, the physical limitations I I get. I mean, especially knee situation, knee pain. I had it for quite a few years. Um, Obviously, I've had a knee replacement, and those are that part of the physical limitation is gone. We're all getting older. We all deal with aches and pains, and at some point, you wake up and it's either a four Advil day or it's not a four Advil day. I mean, you're either you get out of bed and you're not dealing with it, or you just choke down some Advil and you mush on. But I think knowing those physical limitations is what is what you kind of alluded to with there were some days I walked 7 miles. There's some days that I walked 25 miles. I mean, if you can push through it, you're going to do it. And I think that's fine. But if it starts to get a little bit too challenging, stop. You don't push
there's
yourself,
no
you
reason
know?
that I couldn't have had a rest day in there,
Right.
and just
Right.
just take a break and so on. And there, I didn't have a rest day because I still had a goal, but my rest days were just days that I didn't do 20 miles, just took it easy. I finished earlier. I always made it a point to start at a certain time. You want to start early, as early as possible. I don't know. It was just something about it. I had to break through every spider web. I didn't want anybody else to do it.
Right.
But then I knew if I started early, I could, finish early, relax, you stretch, get your tent set up, grab something to eat and just relax, and then, do it again the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. Sitting around the camp. Well, now, were you making campfires? What was the weather like? Did you have a fire at night, or no, you were still?
I don't think I made a single fire.
Okay.
Only because, like, if I got to campsite early, I'd set up my tent and I'd take a nap, and then
Right.
I'd wake up, I grab something to eat. There wasn't, I honestly, it was like conserve energy mode.
Yep. Yep.
And I wasn't going out looking for firewood. I was honestly, by the time, I mean, my knees hurt so bad.
Yeah.
And I'm the type of guy, and I'm with you. I take pain meds every morning. I pop my Advil, my Tylenol, but then that's it. I grunt it out for the rest of the day. So I usually don't take pain medication in the evening unless I'm like.
Well, right. Right.
So setting up my tent in the evening was a chore, only because I'm taking little baby steps,
Yeah.
not being able to.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things that I just got used to. But yeah, it was one of those. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you what time of the year you went.
I want to say it was like September, October timeframe.
Okay.
It was right before the leaves changed.
Okay.
But it wasn't like hot. It was that
Right.
time frame of right before fall, because I really wanted to do it as the leaves were changing color up here, but I knew it was going to get that much colder too.
Well,
and
yeah.
when you go minimalist, it's
Right.
not like your sleeping bag's the warmest.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah. So that's, again, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about preparation for these adventures and knowing your limits. If you are going to do this in a time where the weather is going to be a factor, and rain is a factor, but it's not, you're going to have, there's not much you can do to combat the rain. And what I mean by that is you can buy rain gear and get a tarp and that whole thing. But if you're going to do this in a time where the temperature is going to drop, and that temperature could be dangerously low, again, you've got to understand what kind of gear and what kind of preparation you're going to need. You don't need a fire necessarily when it's 55 or 50 degrees out. You just need a hoodie and, long pants, and you should be okay with a good sleeping bag. So I get that as far as not building a fire, but I guess if you get stuck out there for a little bit longer, you may need to.
My buddy Bo, he is like,
Yep.
He's a professional hiker. He got done with the Appalachian Trail, and he's like, him and his he met his girlfriend out there. They hiked together, and now they're literally, all they do is go all across the U.S. He's a retired disabled veteran, and he lives off his paycheck, and but he'll post pictures of them somewhere up north when it's snowing, and they got the gear, and it's just like everything else, you get climatized to it, you get used to it, and and that's what they do. Is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you experienced, and I think I called you and I called Jamie about 3 weeks ago, and I presented both of you with an adventure towards the end of the year. Obviously, it is going to be my 50th birthday, at the end of this year, and I want to do a winter camp. And I'm not talking, 40-degree winter camp. I'm talking snow on the ground, sub 30 degrees. And I want to do it in Montana. That's the adventure. I have to start preparing for that. But I also, and I called you and I was like, can you do? And you're like, dude, would you just call me a pussy? So
I said, as long as we don't have to do this off our motorcycles.
Right. No, yeah. No motorcycles.
It's not off a motorcycle. I can take whatever I want.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. But it's in Montana. So I don't know that you can actually say that. We're going to.
What's crazy? I know people in Montana. So
well, there you go. So you can ship a lot out there.
Exactly.
But as I've talked about it on this show before, Jamie and I have talked about it. I don't know if you've listened to those episodes or if you've heard me talk about it, but if you want to watch someone truly inspiring, go to the Outdoor Boys channel on YouTube. Luke from the Outdoor Boys. He lives up in Alaska, and he goes out and he does these winter camps in Alaska, snowshoes, cross-country skis in 8-9 feet of snow. And he goes out there with a pack on. I've seen him go out there with a wool blanket, a saw, a knife, and, prepped food like a steak and dough to make bread. And he goes out with those items and makes fire, makes a bed from trees, and sleeps out there. So, I mean, I know my limits and I know that I'm not ready for that, but there is nothing more, I guess, interesting to me and makes me want to test how much I can do when I watch these videos. Like, I really want to give that a shot.
You whip out like a weird packing list with like a wool blanket, and I was like, yeah, I'll be busy that weekend, so you're gonna let me pack what I want to bring.
Oh no, yeah, I mean, everybody will pack their what they want to bring. I mean, when you and I were going on that motorcycle camp, it was as minimalist as I could without obviously being a hike through, right? I mean, I knew that I was going to bring my larger pack and put a bunch of things in it, and I had the motorcycle to add items to. If there's going to be a situation where you and I decide we're going to walk 50 miles on the Appalachian Trail, we're going to meet, we're going to leave the truck, walk 25 miles, camp overnight for 2 nights, walk 25 miles back. That's a different setup. That is entirely a different setup. But I've planned for that and I've prepped for that. I know I can do that.
Yeah, if you're in your car on a bike, you're 5 minutes away from any Walmart in this country,
right?
To get groceries or food or water or whatever. When you set off on foot, you got to be like, all right, how many days away from civilization, am I? So that's a lot of stuff that you got to consider,
right?
When, and I mean, the best part about that trip was the amount of weight that I lost. Just because you're eating for necessity,
right?
You're not,
right.
Of course, you're snacking,
yeah.
But it's one of those things where you have to, I sit here at the house, and all I do is munch, and snack and so on and so on. So I don't know. I've had this conversation with you. I think that, us as human beings, man, we're supposed to be outside. Yeah. We're supposed to do stuff outside. Yep. And I think us as a society just spends too much. So whatever it is, man, it's like my brother-in-law loves to farm. And I was like, why do you like farming so much? I just think he's getting in touch with his roots.
Sure. I mean,
farming.
Yeah. When you say he loves to farm, what part of it does he love? Like baling hay, fixing fences, putting up fences? I mean, what?
you name it. I mean, he loves working on farm, fixing farm equipment. Now he doesn't like it when it breaks, but
Of
that
course.
whole like farming and and raising, giving birth to calves and raising them, then
That's wild.
butchering them,
Oh,
that whole, and
yeah.
the gardening, the hay, so it's that whole, I think it's the whole like being self-sufficient.
Yeah. Farming is obviously no joke. It's a serious lifestyle. It's a serious business. Um, it's a way of life that you commit to fully. I have a buddy of mine who lived in Georgia and had a ton of acreage, had a ton of animals, and he moved out to Texas, and he's like, you don't realize how much money you saved when you have a farm, and you have some of that food that you're able to kind of produce for yourself. Yeah, he told me that it was quite a difference, grocery bill from living in Texas to from since living in Georgia. So, um, you know, this kind of an episode lets us talk about um, a lot of different experiences that we can kind of relate to this, right? Whether you're preparing for a hike across the Appalachian Trail, the C&O Canal, planning a motorcycle trip across the country, a motorcycle camp, car camping, whatever that is, you start at the beginning. And I know this is going to sound rudimentary, but you start at the beginning, and you keep going until you're ready to depart from that. And what I mean by that is, where are you going to go? When are you going to go? What are you going to bring? Who are you going to go with? And then, once you figure that out, okay, well, what are you bringing? What are you bringing? How can we combine things here? If you're doing this with a second person, right? If you and I are walking the Appalachian Trail, do we both need to bring a stove and a pot to cook on, or
We
can we
both
get
need
away
to
with?
bring a sleeping bag on, I can tell you that.
Well, yeah, we're definitely not sharing a sleeping bag, Paul. I mean,
That's I did a motorcycle camping. uh it's called the BDRX. It's a big loop that goes around uh the center of Pennsylvania, and I did it with a buddy, my motorcycle mechanic. And before we left, we're looking at all of our gear, and he's like, "Hey, do you got a toolkit?" I was like, "Yep."
okay,
And he looked at it. He's like, "Well, if you got this, I don't need to bring my toolkit, but I'll bring this." So he brought spare tires. I brought a toolkit because there's no reason for both of
right,
us to have a toolkit,
right,
considering we're both riding together. So yeah, that's an excellent point. And but that, that's part of that planning cycle, and that's also part of that shakeout,
right,
routine.
right.
And we're talking about maybe doing a longer motorcycle ride. And this little BDRX, which we were out for 3 days, well, that was like a planning. That was kind of like a rehearsal.
Are you
And
talking
it's
about the Colorado one?
no, this
No.
was a motorcycle
Oh,
ride I did here in Pennsylvania
got
last
it,
month.
got it. Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's good to have. It was kind of like a little rehearsal ride. Could I could have gone for 3 days without eating if I had to,
Right.
but
Very true.
if there was an issue with my tent, well, who cares? It's a 3 day it's a 3 day little event. So
Right.
plan for, like, I use that to plan for like a week long ride,
Sure.
or so, and so on and so
Sure.
on. But I think that's what makes this stuff. Sometimes we go all in with these great expectations, and we're not realistic about our goals, and we got to be realistic, mentally and physically. And you brought up Mount Everest before. Mount Everest is not a goal for me because it's unrealistic and there are limits there. And there's nothing wrong with setting goals and training for certain goals, but we also have to be realistic, and set limits to those goals because we want achievable goals. Because if we don't achieve those things, when it comes to mental health, now we might not be, we might be taking a couple, rings down that ladder instead of helping to dig out of that hole.
Right. And I think that's kind of an important piece to close this episode on. When you were out there, obviously you had things that were on your mind, and were you able to think through those, clear the mechanism, if you will, and deal with some of those issues?
That's funny because I think I had the clearest mind whenever I was walking. Like it helped me with a lot of issues. And I was talking about like every evening I would write down my 3 highs and my 3 lows. And as I was walking, I'd think about my highs and lows and just think about things that I was dealing with my life. And I can remember one of my lows whenever I was walking is I just like trash. People that leave trash behind, just it pisses me off. I
Right.
see trash along the side of the road, and I wrote about that in one of my lows. Was like, this is a national park. People just throw water bottles along the side of the road, and it just like every time I see a piece of trash, it would irritate me.
Right.
And the more I walked, the more I kind of would analyze these things and I kind of thought about, and I wrote this on my Facebook one day. I was like, you know what? We all have trash, and I might not be leaving trash, physical trash behind, but I guarantee you, I've left trash behind in other people's lives. I've ended relationships wrong, and I've dealt with relationships wrong, and I've dealt with family members wrong, and we all have different trash that we have to deal with, and that physical trash might represent something else, but I have no business judging somebody else for the trash they left behind whenever I probably have just as much, if not more, trash that I've left behind for family members and friends and people to deal with. It's just a different type of trash. So walking those miles gives you time, when you're camping out there, and this is what I recommend. When I go camping, I don't turn music on. I spend time, I'll put my cell phone away, just man, stay out. And with walking, it just gives you time to think, to analyze, to figure stuff out about you. And sometimes you have that, when I teach a firearms class, I always talk about like sometimes you have that aha moment where you can
Right.
sit there and take, firearms class after firearms class, and you just don't get a technique. Like all these instructors talk about a grip, and you're like, oh yeah, well, I grip a handgun. It's like, well, this is, and then you have that aha moment where it's like, oh, that's what that instructor was talking about.
Yeah.
Now I get trigger control now. And then you start having these breakthrough moments. To me, I think I've had more breakthrough moments when I'm picking up brass out on my range, just not letting anything, just thinking
Yeah.
about stuff instead of watching TV or listen to music. You're just,
Right.
and that to me is what's awesome. I told you, I don't listen to a radio when I'm on my motorcycle. It's me, my bike, the engine, and the road.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of self-analysis,
Well,
doing that
and
stuff.
and I think obviously every person differs when it comes to what music does and how music works for you.
Oh, I'm not saying I don't listen to music, but
right.
there are
No,
times.
I get it. Yeah. But personally, I mean, I like the music kind of to just zone out to, but you bring up a really good point. All of the camping trips that I've talked about recently have always had another person. I think that what I need to do is plan one just me. Maybe with Stella, maybe without Stella, but to just sit there and enjoy the quiet time. I put the picture up laying in a hammock the last camping trip I was on, and it said, it just said quiet time. And there was some of that, but you then get distracted with other things, other people around. Going to a campsite during car camping is great, but finding some alone time in the woods and creating your own campsite is probably very therapeutic and very good for your mind, your body, and your soul. And I know that it's something that I probably should do and will do. But folks, I love, and I know I've said this quite a bit, but I love episodes like this. I love them more than we have a topic and we're going to discuss that topic. And in regards to like EDC or bug out bags, right? Those are great shows, but it's shows like this, and it's the last piece that you just put out there about the trash and the kind of metaphor to that makes this show awesome. It's what's going to make this episode amazing, because if you're still here at the end of this episode, what Paul just put out there is, rewind that, listen to that again. We all have trash. And what trash have you left behind? And is it something that you can clean up after the fact? I know that that's probably where my mind is going to venture off to for the rest of the day. And it's something that I need to work on myself. So thank you guys for spending some time with Paul and I today on this show. We do appreciate your feedback, and we do appreciate your time here. So until next time, Paul.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I don't even think I need to say anything after that, but just to key on what we were talking about before, it's, set those goals, but also as you set those goals, make sure that they're realistic, and go out there and prepare for this stuff, do everything to the best of your ability to prep your gear, your mind, and your body, but go out and, man, get outside and live. And you're not going to figure stuff out sitting around watching TV. You gotta have that alone time outdoors to get in touch with certain things. So
Right. All right, guys. Well, you guys stay safe out there, and we will see you next time. ZP002 out.
You got on my case because I didn't say that last time. XP0311 Delta out.
All right, guys. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.